Kudash, 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 Adonai, Elohim, Sabayath, meaning holy, 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 Lord of hosts. Yad, He, Va, He, the four syllables that create the tetragrammaton as a collective whole, which you also know as Yahweh, Yahuwah, Yahweh, or in the English word, you would say Jehovah, because Jah is the English word for Yah. The first Yah is a divine masculine, which signifies the Abba, the Father, who art in heaven. You know, the great architect of the universe, which is divine masculine. He signifies divine feminine, the woman, mother, Anna, who is in the earth, which you know as Mother Nature, because mankind, male and female, were molded from the earth and created in the womb of the earth. Then you have your third syllable, Va, which is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And also, mankind was created on the sixth day of creation. So, Va signifies us, the creation, you know, as it says in the beginning in Bereshith, or what you know as Genesis, also known as the generation of Isis, is in the beginning, Elohim, which is plural, that means more than one, said, let us create them in our image. We are the image, the creation, made it in the reflection of our creators, with an S, you know. We're going to stop watering this down and we're going to get to the real truth, you know, because all we're doing is lowering our own vibration by keep going with the traditions of men and how we were taught to perceive things to be. So, you shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. And then the last one is Hey, which correlates with Ruah, spirit, you know, Ana Chokma, which means mother wisdom, you know. Wisdom is a spirit that is upon us, but also correlates with the first Hey, the mother who art in the earth, you know. So you got divine masculine, Father who art in heaven, up. Then you got Hey, mother, nature, earth, below. Then you got Va, us, the creation, the reflection created in the image. Then you got Hey again, spirit, Ana, Chokma, mother, her. So as above, so below. As within, so without. The macro prosophis is above, and the micro prosophis is below. I'm making a video right now. The micro prosophis is below. So that's how that cookie crumbles. That's always my introduction. So I'm gonna keep that going. All right. Today we're going into the essential Zohar. This is the essential Zohar. The last video I did was based upon death and how death really works in the process of reincarnation. So we're going to further dig a lot deeper into that topic by going into the actual essential Zohar, which is a Kabbalistic kind of book, which deals with esoteric knowledge. Here on my channel, I deal with external, which is exoteric. Exoteric means outward, physical, external, but more so, that's the physical aspect of what we believe and what we were taught. But I deal with more so esoteric knowledge, which is inward, you know, esoteric, inward, you know, spirit, you know, reading energy, you know, things of that nature. You know, the eternal God dwells within you, speaks to you, through your intuition, more so instincts, feelings, you know. You feel your way through, because thinking comes from not knowing. And not knowing, you know, you can overthink it, which can bring you anxiety. But at the same token, when you know something, you don't got to think about it. You can feel it. You feel it. You can get information eternally from how you feel by way of your intuition, which most people know as the third eye, but in the Bible it will say the single eye, you know. You open the single eye and the light will flow in. So this topic is on immortality. So I'm gonna do a part 1 and a part 2 so the video isn't too long, you know. But I'm gonna jump right into it. Alright. This is the Zohar, chapter 25, Immortality. Let's get right into it. In scientific research, a distinction is sometimes made between hard and soft versions of an idea or hypotheses. Physicists, for example, refer to hard and soft interpretations of the so-called anthropic principle, which deals with the relationship between life and consciousness and physical reality. The soft version asserts that life and consciousness came into being because the universe is precisely calibrated to make this possible. The hard version turns this on its head. Consciousness itself brought the universe into being rather than the other way around. A similar hard/soft distinction exists in spiritual matters, and this is especially clear in regards to immortality. Most religions and even many secular thinkers profess belief in some form of existence after death. A soft version of this belief might assert that we live on in the memories of our survivors or in the lasting effect of good and bad actions we performed in the world. A harder approach might suggest that our souls survive the death of the physical body, that they continue to exist in another dimension and perhaps even participate in the world in some disembodied form. But only the hardest version of immortality would suggest that even our physical bodies and our individual identities can live on forever. This, in fact, is exactly what Kabbalah teaches. This most revolutionary transformation will come about through a combination of scientific and spiritual breakthroughs, although the distinction between those two categories is rapidly breaking down. Near-death experiences, for example, have received the attention of both physical and clergy, calling on each other to help explain a phenomenon that has essentially mystified both camps. It is a fact, however, that in modern hospitals, patients who have been declared clinically dead actually return to life. It is also a fact that we have been conditioned to doubt this, or to soften or our interpretation by what we have been told in a scientific view of what is possible and what is not. This conditioning towards doubt has been going on for a very long time. It began in the Garden of Eden, and our first instructor in the limits of possibility was none other than the serpent itself. One of Kabbalah's most important teachings states that negative thoughts are the origin of chaos in our lives. And of all negative thoughts, doubt may be the deadliest. Doubt, 3 Ds, discouragement, doubt, and the devil. Kabbalah teaches that chaos and death, which is the supreme manifestation of chaos, are illusions. Death is an illusion. Fostered by doubt, which creates an opening for negative energy. More specifically, doubt is a questioning of the efficiency or the existence of the spiritual system. It is doubt of oneself and of one's own ability to reveal light. While we still exist under the influence of tree of life consciousness, before the serpent instigated the tasting of the fruit from the tree of knowledge of good and evil, death did not exist. Humanity had no connection with mortality consciousness. But once the fruit was eaten, uncertainty entered the picture. That is, we now doubted that we would live forever, and consequently, we do not live forever. It is the doubt itself that brought us the seemingly reality of death. When humanity is at last transformed, all chaos, including death, will cease to exist. These burdens will evanesce like the Cheshire cat vanishing into thin air. To new students of Kabbalah, this must surely seem radical and assertion, and perhaps even the incredible one. Let us therefore look more closely at Kabbalah's explanation of exactly how chaos and death became a presence in our lives, how they can be erased. When a new life comes into being as a fertilized egg in the womb, this quite obviously represents the beginning of a process, but it is also the completion of a prior chain of events. Male and female energies have joined to form a single cell that encompasses both elements. In this state of wholeness, Kabbalah teaches that the cell is absolutely safe from negative influence. Moreover, surrounded by amniotic fluid, it is protected yet again in accordance with the Kabbalah teaching that the immersion in water provides a shield that chaos cannot penetrate. This condition of utter invulnerability is short-lived. However, the growth process begins and new cells become differentiated as organs, connective tissues, or thousands of other possibilities. Hold on. Differentiation, of course, is necessary in positive development, but it also represents a loss of the completeness that characterized the human cell in its undifferentiated form. By its very nature, the growth of the organism brings about opening in the once impenetrable shield, and when birth brings departure from the immersion within the womb, that protection is lost as well. As life goes on, our loss of wholeness continues apace, and not always as a concomitance of healthy growth. Openings from negativity are created every minute of every day. This is the nature of the world in which we live and the people we have become. It also is the cause of illness, aging, death, and it has fundamentally spiritual basis. The spiritual foundation of the body's deterioration and disease underlies all biomechanical and biochemical processes. These processes are effects, although they are often mistaken for causes. Let me be more specific. When an action or thought affects another human being negatively, the person responsible for that effect increases the quantity of negative entities that are drawn towards them. So when like I tell people before, Entities are energies, and angels are angles of light or enlightenment. His or her own being. Indeed, the responsible person alone created those entities. When we focus destructive energy on others, we bring into being the means of our own self-destruction, nor is there any shield against these entities since they are of our own making. They gain entrance to our innermost being as easily as a robber to whom we have handed our house keys. Fortunately, the reverse of this process is also true. By using the tools of Kabbalah, and most especially the Zohar, we create positive forces whose very existence is inimical to the presence of negativity, just as light is inimical to darkness. The spiritual tools of Kabbalah are not just a defense mechanism, they are a means of rebirth or even pre-birth, a way of returning to the undifferentiated state that for the individual is analogous to the tree of life reality for humanity as a whole. If we find this difficult to accept, it is only because a materialistic, mechanistic definition of reality has limited our sense of what is possible. But these limiting thoughts are the work of our adversary, the angel of doubt. Know your opponent. Like I always say, in order for no weapon formed against you to prosper, you have to know how the workers of iniquity work. You got to know how these demons work. There's actually a book on demonology. You can identify demons just by the traits and the attributes and how they're causing you to feel, or things, the characteristics that you see in other people's behavior. And the Bible even tells you, said, you will know people by their fruits. When you know something by their fruits, what are they blossoming in that specific season? Seeds are always planted, but what are they blossoming? What are they conjuring from what has been planted within them, as far as their behavior, and how you read behavior, you find behavior patterns through consistencies and patterns in it, So, like it says, the adversary, the angel of doubt, know your opponent. The teaching of Kabbalah are a way of life and encompassing action, feeling, and especially thought, which the Zohar particularly emphasizes. Misfortune, illness, and death can never be understood independently of the thoughts that were their seeds. In our minds and souls, we have the power to heal and the power to remain well. We also have the power to achieve immortality. Regardless of what the angel of doubt would have you believe, physical immortality is a reality today, just as it was in the garden. If immortality seems unbelievable, it is because we have detached from the consciousness of infinity and become full citizens of the mundane. Here again, the insight of science can be useful. In 1924, the great physicist Niels Bohr described a principle that he called complementarity. Bohr stated that when a phenomenon is observed in a particular way, the means of observation that reveals certain truth about a phenomenon can obscure other truths. The classic example is an experiment on the nature of light, in which the light's properties as a particle renders its waves properties invisible, and vice versa. If we think of our five senses as an experimental apparatus, the complementarity principle tells us that what we see is what we get, but there is more to be gotten that we don't see. In a similar way, the exclusionary principle described by Wolfgang Pauli in 1925 teaches that no two electrons in an atom can occupy the same energy state simultaneously. Pauli further believes that the principle can be extended to systems much larger than the atom. From a Kabbalistic perspective, I infer from this that the tree of life reality cannot coexist with the world we now live in, just as a room cannot be filled with light and darkness at the same time. Indeed, the dimension of the tree of life cannot even be perceived without a fundamental shift in our perceptions and in the hidden expectations or doubts that exist within them. We do not see immortality because we have focused our awareness elsewhere. As a physicist tells us, consciousness appropriate to a dimension of reality is the prerequisite for accessing the dimension. Therefore, immortality consciousness is essential for understanding how immortality can be obtained and for acting on that understanding. Man was created on the sixth day. That's why I tell you about Ba. Ba is also the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Why was this very important creation saved for last? It is because humanity is the culmination of all that came before, not only in the world as we know it, but in the universe as a whole. Kabbalah teaches that the universe is literally the extended body of humankind. Like I told y'all before, everything that's inside of you is outside of you. As above, so below, as within, so without. And it goes on furthermore to say, it says, a holographic representation of ourselves, just as the human body consists of members and parts that form a single organism, so does the world at large consist of a hierarchy of created things which act and react together to form an organic whole. That's why I tell you, the Elohim as a whole, divine masculine and feminine, as a collective, are a whole. Just like us down here on earth. You know, whether you could say you just a servant of God, you are one of the elect of God, or you just a firm believer. We all activate a collective consciousness, which like a radio station. When we become in tune on the same channel, we're on the same frequency. So without us even being around each other, we can feel, and we 9 times out of 10 we're gonna be saying the same things. You know, like it also says in the Bible, when 2 or more are gathered, the omnipotent spirit is present. You know, that's like if we sit here and say affirmations, prayers, or consecrations in a circle, or just together and holding hands. Guess what? The desired effect is going to be 10 times greater, because it's 2 energies. We're coming together like electricity, input and output, and we're literally creating a current, a whirlwind of energy. But we're chanting the same thing. We're saying the same affirmation and prayer, and we're already vibing on the same frequency. That's why it's going to happen much faster. So it says, we are the blueprint of the entire cosmos, as well as participants in it. Not are we only participants. Humanity was endowed by the Creator with the power to influence and determine the very nature of the universe from the quantum level. You ever heard of quantum mechanics or metaphysics? To the birth and death of stars. Interesting. The The instrument of this great power is nothing more than our consciousness and our realization of the capabilities that are within our grasp. Kabbalah teaches that our thoughts, feelings, and especially our spiritual awareness determines the events in the external, the outwards, physical, which you would call exoteric environment. What takes place in our mind and heart is the ground state of the physical realm. This view, it is interesting to note, is also expressed in the so-called Copenhagen interpretation theory of quantum mechanics and articulated by Niels Bohr. Bohr's idea also erased the clear-cut division between events, physical objects, and human consciousness. At the most basic level, what is observed cannot escape being influenced by whoever is observing. Well, I heard this before. I seen this somewhere recently. It's only when you take your eye off of it or you glance away. But if you lock it into your grasp, it can exist like a light ray particle. Once you look away, it's gone, you know. But if you're locked in on it, it can't leave. That's crazy. Where was I watching? I seen that. It's funny I'm reading it. I've read this all before, but, you know, now that I'm going on specific topics, I want to elaborate more on them. You know, I wanted to do this all in one video, but I got to break this down in two. And since I already just did a video on death the other day, breaking down everything in an energy state or, you know, esoteric spiritual outlook of it, I'm going to go even further, you know. I got to start categorizing my videos better so people that watch them, they can get an in-depth, deeper understanding, overstanding of what's going on. Because if I drop a video here and there, or one on the Akashic Records this day, then another one on Ether this day, you know, it's kind of confusing. You know, you got to go back and cipher through them, you know. But if I do them in like an orderly fashion that all go together, you know, I think that'll work out better. I'm trying to get better with this kind of stuff, you know. It's a lot, but I'm trying. At the most basic level, what is observed cannot escape being influenced by whoever is observing it. So that is true, because I've seen an example of this. In fact, in the absence of an observer, what we think of as immutable physical reality does not even exist. Wow. That makes a lot of sense, though. It all makes perfect sense. The Zohar depicts humankind as an essentially spiritual entity whose fate is determined by the nature of our own thoughts and actions. Cause and effect. That is not to say it is all up to us. Only human beings have the power of free will in determining their spiritual evolution, which in turn is the controlling energy of their physical and material well-being. The fundamental interconnection of consciousness and creation is the very essence of the Zoharic world view. To perceive and embrace this unity is to experience the true spirit of Kabbalah. Kabbalah teaches that even the most basic foundations of the physical world have their origins in the metaphysical and spiritual dimension. This requires us to think of life and death in terms that perhaps cannot be quantified or measured by technological means, but that have their own kind of validation and reality. From this perspective, death is the offspring of aspects of the physical dimension such as gravity and entropy. Spell E-N-T-R-O-P-Y, if I'm pronouncing that right, as described by Maxwell's second law of thermodynamics. The Kabbalistic tells us that the origins of the seemingly immutable forces is nothing more than the desire to receive for the self alone. That's why when I always ask about receiving something, I always say, may I receive. I say one of these affirmations daily. I will always have more money than what I need, because I can't help but attract money into my life. But that's what it says on the original affirmation. But what I go on to say, I can't help but attract money, wealth, substance, abundance, love into my life. And then I'll go furthermore to say, I will always receive with the purpose of sharing with others. And then you say your gratitude, because there's a such thing as gratitude, magic, magneticism, metaphysics. You always have to show gratitude. That's why whenever the Messiah performed a miracle or a blessing, he always said, thank you, thank you, thank you 3 times. And I have a book that breaks all that down as well. It's called Gratitude Magic. So, yeah. So you can't receive for the self alone. So let's read that again. It says, of thermodynamics, the Kabbalistics tell us that the origins of these seemingly immutable forces is nothing more than the desire to receive for the self alone. So a lot of these things, you know, you can't even perform them, because once you do, or the Most High, the omnipotent and inevitable, you want one, you know, which is a collective consciousness, grants you something, you know, you always have to receive with the purpose of sharing with others. You know, if you do things for self alone, you're going to get the opposite reverse effect, you know. So when self-directed desire is transformed into desire to receive for the sake of sharing, both gravity and entropy will cease to exist, along with the limitations of time, space, and matter itself. Kabbalah is very clear about this. The only reason that aging, pain, and death are part of humanity experience is the control over the material universe exerted by the desire for ourselves alone. So it's basically saying, instead of doing stuff for self, we got to work together in harmony. We got to work together as a collective consciousness. We got to be on one accord. We can't be in disagreements, because everybody has a different ability that the next one doesn't have. You know, each one teach one. You know, we all got to study until we show ourselves approved. And we got to work together on the same frequency instead of debating with each other, you know. We're not in religion anymore, you know. Religion does all this debating, you know, to try to keep you trapped in a one-sided point of view, you know. This is not what we're doing, you know. We're connected to the all now. Alkaluna is the all, because we know that God is in all things. God is a collective consciousness. So now we're dealing with the all, you know, that's in all things. Now we're expanding our consciousness as spiritual beings, you know, because that's all we were put here to do, is be spiritual beings, you know. We're put here to do more, but, you know, you get what I'm saying, on that side of things. Not to be in religion. That's being in jail, spiritually. Bunch of half-ass truth, because it don't even got the collective whole of the puzzle to begin with. You know, how you going to argue with somebody about something and you don't even got the whole full truth about it? That's why the Bible said, anybody that add into this book, I'm going to add into them the plagues in which I talk about in this book. Anybody that take away from this book, I'm going to take away their portion from the book of life, as it says in the book of Revelation, the book of Revealing, you know. It's about to be apocalypse of great information out here, a great revealing, you know, like it's happening now. That's why people like me are able, see, I can come out the woodwork so confidently. Like the same things I used to judge people about and look down at them about and try to argue with them about, I really didn't know nothing, you know. And then imagine how many people I was coming up with that started to judge me after a while. And then I started realizing, like, people, they don't even know the half, you know. But this wasn't me deciding to do this on my own. It was my spirit, you know, for the expansion of knowledge, you know, along with limitations in matter itself. Kabbalah is very clear about this. The only reason that aging, pain, and death are part of human experience is the control over the material universe exerted by the desire for ourselves alone. When that control is eliminated, all those realities which will be erased. Many centuries ago, Rabbi Shimeon Bar Yacha wrote that 2,000 years would pass before the raising of human consciousness to a new level of awareness would become possible. That moment has finally arrived. A global transformation from greed to sharing is taking place as never before. When a critical mass of the world's peoples participates in this transformation, immortality will become a reality. As these immense changes take place, the spiritual tools of Kabbalah can help us to strengthen the consciousness of immortality, as well as to understand its connection to the primordial events of the Genesis story. Specifically, the Zohar takes up the theme of immortality in a discussion of Adam's progeny. It gets deep. It gets deep. We're gonna come out with part 2 right after this, but I'm gonna let this one upload first. But this Zohar is deep. This is one of the books. I always tell people I read books from back to front, but this one I read this whole thing through. I got it highlighted all the way through, but there's so many gems in there. And it actually, in this book, is so good because it goes into the scriptures of the Bible and it breaks down what was really going on in them stories, and that you might look at as a metaphor, and sometimes and you be trying to like put a physical interpretation on it, but it's really more spiritual and esoteric than you think. The whole Bible is esoteric, Just like when I tell you that the kingdom is within you, People be taking things so literal and out of context, but you got to realize we're spirit. The universe, the heavens is already inside of us. We're trying to bring the kingdom to earth. So we got to bring what's inside us, the internal parts, to the external and bring the kingdom to earth. But it's telling you we got to be all harmonizing on the same frequency. And if we're not harmonizing on the same frequency and we divide it, because what's it the devil's job to do? Kill, steal, and destroy. Divide and conquer. If you dividing spiritual beliefs up into denominations, different sectors, and taking away from the collective whole, and guess what? People are working with fragments and just a piece of knowledge. And everybody's going to debate that because, oh, I got the right name over here. Nobody's right or nobody's wrong, because it's multiple names. And these names have a lot of power. Trust me. It's so much. But stay in tune for part 2, This is the first part of Immortality. I'm uploading this right now. It's a lot so big.